Assalamu alaikum, peace and the mercy and blessings of Allah be with you. Thank you for joining me for this continuing discussion on 30 reasons for being Muslim. Today, I want to look at the compatibility between reason and revelation, more so the Quran's invitation to us to think, to reflect, and to study. Now, previously we looked at the compatibility between the Quran and modern science, so now we're broadening the discussion to look at the compatibility between reason and rationality, and the Quran's invitation for us to think and reflect. To me, that's a very good reason for being Muslim. A lot of Muslims are very much enthusiastic about the idea that the Quran really takes that stance and gives us that encouragement to go ahead and think and to reflect and so on. If you step away from the Quran and Islam for a moment, we look at the broader picture, we see that in the world's religions, people really struggle with the conflict between reason and revelation. On the one hand, they have certain faith items, creeds, and dogmas that they're supposed to believe in, and they find it very difficult to hold those beliefs. Some of these beliefs seem rather contradictory and difficult to comprehend. For example, who exactly is their God, and how does God forgive sins, and so on. All of these things sometimes are found to be very different from what a reasonable person might conclude. And so what do you do when you have this inner conflict between, on the one hand, what your faith requires of you, and on the other hand, what your reason and rationality says is even possible? So again, people find themselves in this dichotomy and turn to a rejection of religion altogether. And when they hear about Islam, initially they think, oh, well, we heard all about that before. We know what religion is like, a whole bunch of incomprehensible and contradictory doctrines and so on. But what needs to be pointed out is that the Quran actually invites us to use our reason and reflection to think, to study, and to ponder about things. So, for example, the Quran tells us about in the second chapter regarding the people before us that they did not use their reason. The Quran is asking them, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ? Do you not use your reason? When people enter into hell, according to the Quran, they will confess, according to the 67th chapter of the Quran, the surah which you know already, Tabarak, the 67th chapter of the Quran, it says that they will say, لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير. If we had only used if we had listened or used our intellect, we would not be companions of the fire. So they would not have entered the hell if they had used their reason. That means that using the reason would be a way of preventing a person from going to that wrong place. And similarly, the Quran points out in the 22nd chapter, Surah Al-Hajj, that people should travel, because by traveling, your hearts open up, your minds open up for you to understand more. And the Quran is saying, have they not traveled so that they can develop that kind of mind which will understand the truth? So all of this shows that the Quran is emphasizing thinking and reflection. The word aql, which means intellect, occurs in the Quran about 50 times in many different chapters of the Quran. We mentioned chapter Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Quran. It occurs in there several times, and it occurs again and again throughout the Quran. In the third chapter of the Quran, we find mention of ulul albab, the people who are deep in their thinking. Actually, the second chapter mentions it too, Surah Al-Baqarah. In Surah Al-Baqarah, it says, whoever has been given wisdom has been given a lot of good from God. And it's the same thing, that the people who are al-albab, they are deep in their thought, they are the ones who are given this great benefit from God. And then coming back to the third chapter in the 7th verse, the Quran says, وَمَا يَذَكَّرُ إِلَّا أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. Only the people who are so deep in their thinking are going to properly remember God. The Quran itself refers to itself as a book of wisdom. The 36th chapter of the Quran begins, Yasin, wal Quran al-Hakim. Yasin, by the wise Quran. So the Quran calls itself a wise book. And there too, in that surah, the Quran is calling on people to use their intellect to think and to reflect. So, for example, the Quran is asking the people who enter hell in the end, أَفَلَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْقِلُونَ? Did you not used to use your intellect? And the Quran says in the same surah towards the end, وَمَنْ نُعَمِّرُ نَكِّسُ فِي الْخَلْقِ أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ? Whoever we give long age to, we reverse them in the creation. Do they not use their intellect? And so on. And the Quran invites us to reflect, to use what is called tadabbur, to think, carefully about the Quran. For example, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ? Do they not ponder upon the Quran? And the Quran tells us to think and reflect on the Quran itself and on the creation of the heavens and the earth. So in the 3rd chapter towards the end, وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, and they reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth. So, we can go on and on about this. There are so many statements in the Quran about the use of the intellect, about thinking, reflection, traveling, seeing more, examining things, and so on. That this would be a lengthy discussion, but I want to cut it off here by concluding and saying that there's a very good reason for being Muslim. The idea that the Quran invites us to think and to reflect and to ponder and to study. That empowers Muslims to go out into the world, to make the world a better place, to study more, to travel, and to interact with other people, to share ideas, to learn more, and to teach others. So a good reason for being Muslim, the Quran's invitation for us to think and reflect and study. Join me tomorrow for another good reason for being Muslim. Peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum. We're taking Let the Quran Speak to the next level by establishing the Muslim Media Hub. This Ramadan, please support us to help us get this project off the ground. Please visit QuranSpeaks.com.